Okay, so first of all, a big thank you for being here. This is Sunday, it's Chicago in the winter. I know you have reasons to be here for AHR, but still thank you for being here a day early. I think we all think this is important and really appreciate this conversation. And we want to make a special thanks to these companies, especially kind of the top half of that's actually done a significant amount of work in the last few months on moving forward some of the things we're talking about, specifically to do with the IBB. So thanks for their effort, and hopefully next year that list will be longer and bigger. So, anything on that? Okay, so Rick.
So how many were at the summit last year, 2023? Well, great. We didn't scare too many people off. And this year, we're significantly more focused. Last year, we were really looking for feedback, and I think we got a lot of consensus around several points, but interoperability was something that the industry needed, that the mismatch between supply and demand of technologies was not where it needed to be. We had identified and we got feedback on these 5 different things: interoperability, analytics needed to be more plentiful and used everywhere. Specifications would really help to drive the industry and adoption. And they're, meant to say interoperability. The opposite of interoperability, being proprietary, was potentially holding back some of the industry, and we need to figure out how to migrate some of the proprietary systems to be more interoperable. Also, procurement was identified and got a lot of feedback on the fact that procurement processes really were also kind of getting in the way of more rapid adoption. And then workforce. So that's were the 5 topics last year. And then we kind of went away from that saying, okay, great. Let's bring some people together, some experts in each of these areas, to focus on how to set the path for overcoming these barriers that have been identified as holding the industry back. And not everybody agrees with every single issue about how we're going about it, but this year, for the past 9 months, what we really focused on is trying to set a path to show how open systems and interoperability specifically can actually drive the industry forward more rapidly. And a key part of that was, well, as we were kind of reflecting on, okay, well, workforce makes sense, know how to do some things around that. Specifications, well, we worked on 2525. Pete Scanlon took the lead on that, along with Ron and a few other people. But then in procurement, we've got some stuff we're going to talk about in this next session that's about that. But then the whole interoperability was kind of a key stumbling block, and that's where we're like, okay, how do we get a bunch of people together to like start to set a path for defining interoperability for this industry in a way that would really be different than the way things were done in the past. And I'll say that what happened was we kind of were looking around, and dropped right in our lap was this, from the Linux Foundation, was this thing called cloud native computing. And that became then the focus of the technology side of all the work that our committees were doing. And cloud native computing became something that a lot of people didn't completely understand. I don't completely understand all of it anyway. I'm not a technical guy. But the Cloud Native Computing Foundation is actually an organization. It's a nonprofit that is part of the Linux Foundation. And here they were like dropping these gifts for us to be able to follow in terms of how to take technology and apply it to our domain. At the same time, those same technologies are being used for other domains. So there's some really good precedent being set for how to use the Linux Foundation components to affect a particular industry. So today, a big part of what you're going to see is the work that's been done by a whole bunch of people that are in this room to actually show that there's a path that's already being carved or paved, or I don't know what we haven't paved anything. But we're blazing a trail to show how to use some of these open and interoperable tools for our industry to migrate from where things have been really difficult to integrate to where things, as we'll talk about later, a whole bunches of hard work have now been streamlined or abstracted, as Carly introduced the word abstraction to, like, thought I knew what that meant. Learned a whole new definition of abstraction. So you're going to see a lot of, are you supposed to put on the little demo teaser now? Or is that?
We can do it now. Yes. So,
Or am I out of order?
no, okay, out of order is fine. So this is a little teaser of what we'll be sort of talking about later. This is basically a way to, this is the IBB. I'm not going to spend much time now, but we'll come back to it. It's just a little teaser of what's going on.
So the way of creating connections between systems can be fundamentally different. And we have kind of been a little bit under the radar for the last 6 months, but we've been really focusing on trying to bring together the experts that can prove that these methods for interoperability and leveraging these off-the-shelf technologies can really work in our industry. And so a lot of very specific things that have been done are going to be sort of revealed today. So
cloud native may be new to some of us, but Kennedy is not new to your firm, right? You were telling us earlier about how they was kind of saying "der."
Yeah. So as I was sitting with our partners, and I was explaining this idea, right? And I had came with an hour-long conversation recorded and 10 pages of notes and all of Anto's demos. And I was, I'm describing this. And one of my partners said, "Oh, that's it?" And they said, "That's really not that hard. We containerize things every single day in IT. And it's really important that we take, and part of why I'm here at AHR, part of why I would love to chat with you guys is because we have to talk to each other, right? And if we have an entire groups, teams and workforces who can say, yeah, I can do this. Oh, that's easy. We've got to utilize that, right? We've got to be able to work together collaboratively to help grow that network to make this an easier process across the board.
Thank you. Thanks. One key tool that we've developed is this thing called the Smarter Stack. We actually developed it a couple of years back, sort of at Monday Live and the Coalition. And you'll actually see this pop up throughout the summit. And it's really a key tool because it's really a way of actually picturing all of the components necessary to make a building smart, right? And typically, when you're actually thinking about what it takes to make a building smart, you're talking about the applications and data and APIs and all this kind of stuff. But what the Smarter Stack does is it takes it all the way from the purpose. Why are you doing it? Why are you making the building smart? So you really have to sort of start that at that. And I'm going to leave it to Pete to sort of explain more. And this then became the sort of the motivation and how we actually structure the DIP 2525. So it's really important. Glenn, do you want to pitch in now?
Sure. I don't remember what I talked about last year. I think it was interoperability. I know that.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, it was. Okay. All right. Well, if I'm repeating myself, somebody can raise a hand and I'll change the story. I view this all as a much larger narrative than just interoperability. It's about the complexity of systems, particularly in the mission-critical, business-critical world, mostly B2B, but buildings and cities and supply chains and factories and so forth. And I always use the analogy of your automobile as the easiest way to explain what a smart, complex, and adaptive system is. In a car, you have powertrain, brakes, infotainment, navigation, et cetera. All of those things are very, very tightly coupled and have to perform in very, very, very deterministic time frames. And, that's a very deterministic system because if I don't hit the brakes, I'll kill the old lady in front of me or kill myself in the car or both of us. Now, when you apply that sort of framing of this whole story, to other parts of the economy, particularly, again, the mission-critical part, but buildings and cities and supply chains and factories and so forth, what we realized a couple, 2 or 3 years ago is that all these smart adaptive systems are kind of on the same journey, but at different levels of maturation in terms of that coupling, interdependence, and how these things work synchronously together. And, you know, if there's some groups that are way out there, like spaceships and missiles and cars and things like that, there are, you know, other places where things are a little bit slower, like the building space. And because nobody would accuse a building today of being a tightly coupled, well-orchestrated, interdependent system of subsystems. It's kind of a crazy collection of things spewing data now, but not getting much further than that, and not easily and not readily. And so in this concept of adaptive systems, we say, at the end of the day, there are three things you need to understand about what this will do to all industries that are mission critical everywhere. Eventually, we can argue about the timing all we'd like. But one is, it's inevitable. It will happen. It has to happen. There's too much value contained in that interdependence and interrelatedness that you know, eventually even the customers in the building space will actually wake up and pay attention to this and figure out ways to communicate this need. And eventually suppliers, as always, will tend to evolve and respond to that. But it's inevitable. And so anybody that's not on the bus ought to be getting on the bus. The second, and we did this twice a year or so back for a client, where we tried to estimate how much data businesses would actually need as the world was kind of evolving towards model-based, more dynamic applications, and you're looking at AI and machine learning content in these kinds of applications. Where was all the data going to come from that would allow people to model things, or once I did model things, actually operate things in that more dynamic context? And we reached the conclusion, after looking at several sectors of the economy, that typically less than, in the B2B mission critical world, typically less than 50% of the data you will need to run your business in the future is going to come from your business. So not only is open systems and interoperability inevitable, it will actually become a competency within most businesses participating in, if they have any dependency on data, and who's not going to have dependency on data in this future. So the third point is that I think all those who have in the past have been, you know, proprietary, walled gardens, whatever term you want to apply to all this, I think the way to think about this is it's creative contention, it's not negative contention. And the story about data is, in that context of creative contention, is, I always use this silly preschool analogy, but if half the data to run my business or more is not available to me, we need to share because we care, what they taught me in preschool. And so look at the change in the nature of the business models and the relationships as something that may drive contention, which I think it does, and it certainly does culturally with you know, kind of old line or typical traditional businesses, particularly OEMs. But that contention is grist for creativity, and if it's inevitable and you need to be on the bus to do it, then let's make it a more interesting and creative trip.
Thank you. Thank you. And collaboration is kind of key to that, right?
Absolutely. We all have to get along.
Well, the collaboration is something you're going to see a little bit of, and maybe it won't be terribly obvious, but what we've been working on in our committees over the last 9 months or a year has all been virtual. Just like the fact that I've never met my boss, I'd never met half the people that are working on these different projects until today. They all work for different companies. They all bring different skills. They're all bringing and seeing an opportunity. So I just wanted to point that out. And along the way, we're going to highlight some of the people that have been doing some of the work as they come to mind, put them on the spot to talk.
Okay, so this is our agenda for this afternoon. Rick, you want to take the first one? I'll take the second.
Yeah, so specifying and procuring, talked a little bit about that. It was a big part of what we talked about, did and demonstrated last year. We want to show what sort of progress has been made towards new models, refining of the 2525, Division 2525, and then start to tease people's imaginations about new business models and new ways of going to market or new ways of procuring that have not been possible or have been held back by some of the technology models that are out there. So it's kind of a little bit of a mind bender. What comes first, chicken or egg, right? Do you have to have new tech to get a new business model, or do you have a new business model and get new tech?
So looking forward to that. That'll be led by Pete Scanlon. And then at 4 o'clock, I'm going to take the lead on that to talk about the IBB and specifically to do a demo. So this morning I was praying to the demo gods, so hopefully everything will go well.
And Tristan knows how to juggle if the demo doesn't go well.
Yeah, he's a good juggler. Ecosystem panel discussion.
Well, this is all about cooperation and collaboration and how we get along together and do things new
Mike.
and different. And I think one of the most important things people need to pay attention to is if software has already invaded everything and that we're now moving to like every business out there, doesn't matter what you do, is becoming a technology business of one stripe or another. There's lots of opportunities to evolve the way these relationships work based on the way all of this plumbing diagram that underlies all this will work. And the two should be harmonious.
Thank you. And workforce,
Yeah. 5 o'clock, we're going to talk about workforce. If you guys look around this room, a lot of you look alike. And we've got to be innovative. We've got to make sure that we collaborate together as a workforce to, get new people in, grow this group so that when you guys, can finally retire 10 plus years from now, there are people that, I'm being generous, people in your feet, in your footsteps behind you. So that's going to be 5 o'clock.
and then we're going to come back at 5:30 and wrap up and really focus on what should we do now? What's the call to action to make all of this happen, right? So really looking forward to that. And if we survive all of that, we get some beer, as I said.
And watch the Chiefs game. And what's the next slide?
The next slide is, yes, so we do have some news to make that in June, we are going to be joining the RealCom and IBCon event in Tampa. And just to explain what that's all about, it's Lisa.
Thank you, Anto. I'm Lisa Woods. I'm one of the managing partners for RealCom. How many have been to a RealCom conference? Oh, nice. A lot more than I thought. Well, for those of you that don't know RealCom, we've been around. We're actually going to be celebrating our 26th anniversary. 25th was last year in Las Vegas, 26th this year in Tampa. And what we do is really focus on the commercial and corporate real estate industry, bringing together the real estate end users to talk about technology. Automation, technology, and innovation is really our tagline. And our focus is to educate. We are a global research and event company that really focuses on making sure that we are doing everything that we can to accelerate the adoption of technology. So in that way, we are very, very similar to this community that we have in the room. And it just makes sense that there would be a partnership there so that we can pull our communities together. We have a lot of similar goals: the advancement of technology, obviously the adoption of technology, getting people out of their silos and working in those silos and not communicating with one another. Some of those other goals, also might be just the education of technology. So there's so many people out there still that don't actually know what smart building technologies do, and all of the different capabilities and all of the different, just the breadth of capabilities that they have. So what we would like to do is to join hands with your community, and we're sort of on the real estate end user side. You guys are on the building automation solution side, and there are just a lot of synergies and a lot of opportunities, I think, to join our communities and really move the ball forward a lot more efficiently and a lot more quickly. So we are getting together and having a place for the Smarter Summit event in Tampa. Probably we're going to be working on those details and we'll share those with you. But June the 19th on Wednesday, I think, is going to be the date, and putting together a session as part of our pre-conference agenda. And we'll be working very closely with Anto and the rest of your team. We're very excited about the opportunity and very excited about what we can do together. And so we are looking forward to that day. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We're looking forward to that as well. But the only thing that I couldn't figure out is, so this summit, winter in Chicago, and then June in Tampa. Anyway,
And there will certainly be some important game that's going on right during the middle of it.
okay. Steve, do you mind coming and saying a couple of things about how this is really sort of a big change? Just a brief comment on that.
So hello, everyone. Steve Fay. I'm, I guess, you could say a veteran of the industry. And right now, my primary role in life right now is president of ISMA Control the US. So if you don't know about them, come look us up at booth 6027. But in my role here today as part of the Smarter Summit, I want to just point out a basic fact that the smart building industry has, from a technology standpoint, you can argue we follow the curve. And you can also argue that we follow the curve sometimes fairly slowly. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But let's own that fact. But what you're going to hear today, which is very important, is that the computing industry has been moving rapidly. And we've introduced this notion of cloud native. So what's this all about? Well, to put some perspective on it, consider the fact that Amazon, with its AWS service, was introduced in 2007. Right? That's not very long ago, right? In 2022, the cloud computing marketplace was worth $500 billion. 10 years from now, it's forecasted to be $2.5 trillion. The world has absolutely moved to cloud as the paradigm for computing. So that's why today's discussion, particularly when you see the introduction of what we call the IBB, or interoperability building blocks, is so important for our industry to get behind. There's there is some motion with certain companies trying to move their products to the cloud. Some of the new entrants from the IoT space are already leveraging the cloud. But as an industry, we've got a long way to go. And as users, everyone in this room is using the cloud, whether you know it or not, every single day. That wonderful little device you hold in your hand and look at when you have nothing else to do, that smartphone, it's stunning to look at the statistics about smartphone users, because with a population of the planet of 8 billion people, there are already 6 billion smartphone users in place today. That's how ubiquitous it has become. So I'll talk more about this in my session at, when is it, 5 o'clock? 5-ish. But I just wanted to frame the discussion of how important it is that we understand the impact of cloud computing in our lives, and how important that is that we bring that, we embrace it here in the smart building industry. And in concert with that is the fact that users, or the user experience, is being driven out of that whole environment. And the primary device that we're experiencing that is our phone. Yes, there are desktops, and there are lots of desktops out there, and that's been our paradigm up to now. But frankly, it's the phone that is going to be the primary user, because that's what we're all doing sitting in this room when we're not working on our building automation systems or whatever other kind of smart system you happen to have. So I just wanted to frame the discussion here before we get started.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Steve. So, going to wrap the opening. I don't think do you have any closing comments? Or just...
By the way, if somebody's wandering around putting a camera in your face, it's because this whole thing is being recorded. It's not streamed live, don't worry. It's being recorded, so if anybody screws up, we'll just do a second take, okay? Just saying.
Take 2.
Great.
Okay. Pete and Chris and Jim, do you want to come up? And thanks guys. And just one thing while they're coming up, the word smarter, we've been using this word smarter for a couple of years now. And it's actually quite important because 2-3 years ago, we kind of came to the realization, this is on Monday Live, that we've all been telling people that we want smart buildings, right? And yet there is no single definition of smart buildings. Everybody has their own, right? So it's really difficult. The endpoint of smart buildings is difficult to figure out. And then also it's something that's actually very hard to do. Doing smart buildings is hard, right? So we're asking a lot of people to do something that we can't really say what the destination is, and it's really hard, right? So this is one of the reasons we think why just the framing of smart buildings is that it's very, very difficult for it to progress. Smarter, on the other hand, is actually much more sort of progress-oriented, right? Any one of you can do something in a building to make it smarter. Just that little bit, and somebody else will make it even smarter. And that's kind of the idea of smarter buildings, is that it's incremental change that will actually take us to somewhere that's really good. So just want to bring that up. Guys.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Pete Scanlon, co-founder of a company called Verdicity that provides smarter building solutions to commercial properties around the country, and also one of the co-founders of the Coalition for Smarter Buildings. Going to share the next half hour with my two friends here. Chris, want to let you introduce yourself?
I'm Chris Battisti. I am the control systems lead for military programs for the Army Corps of Engineers. So thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about this stuff.
Thanks, Chris.
Hi, my name's Jim Lee. I'm president of Symmetrics in Boston. Been around the industry for more than 35 years. Very involved in BACnet standardization, BACnet testing, cybersecurity, and analytics.
Great. Thanks, Jim. So the title of our session here, we're starting off the Smarter Summit today. It started off at specifying, procuring smarter buildings. You know, procurement reform sounds kind of hard to get excited about, perhaps, although we talked a lot about it last year at this first Smarter Summit. But I simplified that down to, you know, how do we buy and sell new stuff, right? That's more what I end up having conversations about with prospective customers and partners all the time. So we want to talk about that. I think buyers want new stuff. They know they need to do things differently, and they're excited about the possibilities. Sellers create new stuff and want to bring that to market. And so we want to spend a little bit of time here talking about the process. So to kick that off, Chris, I wanted to ask you, you kind of representing the Army here and the Army Corps of Engineers. You guys buy complicated stuff all the time, and I imagine that having new things, new innovations is important to what you guys need to bring to the portfolios that you manage. So you want new stuff. How does the Army buy new stuff?
In a convoluted and long-term way, but so we, when it comes to buying new stuff and there's a big need for it, it's a pretty long process. So just to get funding to do something new in the Army or the Department of Defense in general, there's a from conception all the way to kind of reality, it's a 5 or 6 year process in many ways. And so with that, we try to think far enough ahead to where what do we need to actually do to make our systems operate effectively and in a resilient way. We have a pretty robust specification and criteria process to verify that things actually work at the end of the project. And we really need to consider, hey, what can actually help us operate better? The Army is not while they own a lot of buildings, they're not, their main mission is not to own buildings, it's to trade and fight wars, right? So we have to convince them, hey, this technology can help me solve XYZ problem. And in a lot of ways, that's this interoperability we're talking about. So from our perspective, it's kind of looking forward to where, hey, can I make something, new technology be used in the future, but my current building can do it still, right? Can I plug it in? Can I plug this new technology or data analytics in and make my life easier, make my operations go a lot better? And thinking about that from a life cycle is something that we have to consider a lot. And also, can a mid-level contractor and a mid-level engineer do it? Because, from a low bid process, a lot of times it's hard to get the cream of the crop to come in and do our work for us. So it's got to be verifiable, it's got to be usable, and also the interoperability is huge for us considering we're putting in microgrids in. A lot of our systems are using more renewables, and we need everything to be talking together for our big installations.
Thanks, Chris. Just as we get started here, Jim, your company sells new stuff. So what barriers do you guys run into, and what good ideas are you seeing to bring new stuff to market?
Great. Thanks, Pete. So I think that, we've all been talking about this. We talked about it last year. We're certainly at an inflection point when it comes to procurement in the industry. The current methodology for specifying mechanical systems and controls in buildings is, it's largely gotten to the point where we've been working on a system which is predicated on a 100-year-old process that considers the building to be static, right? And that asset will operate as it was built, for somewhere between 30 and 100 years. So, while people have paid lip service to life cycle costing models, in reality, financial decision makers do everything they possibly can not to spend money on operating cost, right? I mean, that's baked into the financial fabric. And that's a huge problem because, when you look at the evolving nature of our society now, the use of building assets as they become more dynamic, I'm not just talking about Office Armageddon, but the operational technologies we deal with, as has been discussed, are in the process of converging with IT. And so a 30-year time horizon, just doesn't synchro mesh with the 3-year time horizon that IT changes. So it's basically just no longer tenable. So the industry is coming up for a need to change. So just as an example, cybersecurity. We know that cybersecurity is very dynamic. The threats are changing all the time. Let's look at this huge complex that we're in now. Did they contemplate cybersecurity and the controls when McCormick Place was built? Of course not. And, so if we look at those time horizons, we're getting squeezed between where the dynamism of how that asset needs to change over time does not comport with the funding mechanisms that are in place. So it's my thesis that building owners are about to hit the wall with this, and traditional low bid processes are not going to deliver good outcomes in the long term. And other trends like short staffing are compounding that problem. So what I see overall is an evolution in the industry towards as-a-service models. So we really have to make a transition from, hey, we're going to preconceive what this asset's going to do for the next 100 years. We're going to plan it out as carefully as we can and go with it. Not going to fly anymore. So we need to change to operating models, and I think that's going to bring about this evolution to as a service. And a bunch of the other things we're going to talk about today, like the IBB, really play into that heavily in this cloud native push that we're talking about. So for the last, so that's how I would frame the problem. But the larger question is what have we been doing about it as a group? And for the last 3 years, Monday Live and C4SB have been looking at ways to get the industry across this chasm from a traditional procurement involving CSI specifications and low bid to a system where we're actually reimagining how the elements of the procurement should take place. And that includes interoperability, and many of the other things that have been discussed. So we've designed a concept called the Smarter Stack, which Anto has put on the screen. And Pete, you want to change the slide to bring it up for a second? Well, let's take this one for a minute. So in addition to the Smarter Stack, Division 2525 is a series of specifications for how we're going to move towards this open procurement model. And in a second, Pete can tell you about it because he's been the editor-in-chief of that document. Can you advance to the Smarter Stack for a second? Next one. It's up there. There we go. Good. So if we reimagine the problem of interoperability, of how we're going to procure systems, we need to start with a framework or basic language around how we're all going to talk about that. That includes both vendors as well as integrators, as well as customers. And really, the Smarter Stack is a step in that direction. The purpose of interoperation is really an owner's statement. The master system integrator requirements on the 252500 is contractual requirements and sort of business relationships. Operating roles and responsibilities, all about who's actually going to use these systems, defining the roles of the people, how are they going to be trained, what is it that they're intending to do. Information delivery, how we're going to get that information in a decent format. Digital applications, these would be things like analytics or functions that people need to do in the building. Orchestration, you'll hear a lot about orchestration. The IBB is all about preparing the systems to interoperate by exchanging information, not on just the data, but what the systems themselves need to do. Finally, moving on to data governance, we have metadata models and things that span that layer. Controls and automation, that's the traditional controls business that we know a lot about. And finally, the physical layer is the actual hardware itself. So that's how we've broken it up. The two things on the right-hand side are very important. Networking, as all of these elements are connected together using computer networks, and cybersecurity, all cross-cutting issues. So happy to talk more about it. Pete, would you like to tell us a little bit more about Division 2525?
Sure. I'm going to go back one. So many projects when they get done are follow a bid process or a specification bid build process that follows and employs a master format organization that a lot of general contractors or MSIs use to coordinate the efforts of a lot of different trades together to make the finished product happen, right? So this happens in construction. This happened in construction for decades, and this is the full list of all the different divisions that the construction industry uses to build whole buildings or to do specific projects within buildings. Over 50 different divisions. There is one called Division 25, Integrated Automation. Some of you may already use it or respond to it if you're a vendor. Division 25 has been, just in the last 5-6 years, has actually been kind of a hodgepodge of, it's like a catch-all for the digital parts of a lot of the other sections, a lot of the other divisions. So if 23 is HVAC and 26 is electrical, and those things need to speak to each other. Sometimes, if there are extra specifications, they just got thrown into Division 25. And there wasn't a lot of organization to that, and different projects use it differently. Some don't even use it at all. They just refer to extra section in 23 or something like that. The Coalition for Smarter Buildings and Monday Live saw this as an opportunity to claim a subdivision in Division 25. So we're proposing, and we're in discussions with CSI, the Construction Specifications Institute to kind of have them bless this. But we're proposing that part of Division 25 be called 25.25 Master System Integration Requirements. So this would be the place if you're an owner or if you write specifications for owners where you would say, this is what I want. This is how I want it and what I want. And if you're a vendor or a supplier, this is now what you look to say, I can do it this way. I can do what I do like this in Division 2525. So this is where it comes from, why we're using this lingo here about divisions from CSI and the master format. And we've referred to the Smarter Stack a couple times already today. In the past, the siloed solution that was a smart solution did all of these pieces for one purpose, right? Each time you had a new purpose, you'd have a new set of systems that spanned all of these parts. You have a purpose, who's going to do it, how they're going to get that information. Here's an app that's going to do it. What information what data does it need, and how it's coordinated, and it's all tightly knit together all the way down to the physical layer of the systems and the devices that are on site, like a new IoT sensor or an existing system. So all of those solutions were vertical, and the reason we created the Smarter Stack was to illustrate that you can take that vertical solution apart into these layers, and if you understand the layers, you can see how exchanging information at not just at the middle layer of orchestration, but different information needs to be exchanged at all different layers here. And you have to think about it horizontally, not just vertically. So for owners, you can say, I want a solution that's built to do that. And if we layer Division 2525 into it, we are recommending organizing using this division in specifications for projects to follow these layers. And again, an owner would say, or a buyer would say, I want it done this way. And if you sell products or services, you could say, we do layer 40 really well, or we do 40, 50, and 60 for a certain part, a certain purpose, like aimed to a certain industry or aimed to create a certain outcome. And if we as sellers, I mean, my company does this too, if we as providers to the owners say, can be very clear, here's what my company does, we will have to, in order to make the whole project, the whole portfolio be smarter, you're going to need other players to do some of these other pieces. And that way we're all using the same language and to map out what role I'm going to play as a supplier, and then for the owners to say, okay, this is how I'm going to get the full solution I need. I'm curious, Chris, as you see this outline for division, proposed outline for Division 2525, the Army has used Division 25 in the past. What was your experience there, and is this helpful?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we have a couple specs in Division 25 that we require for projects. We have a front-end spec for integration, and then we also have a cybersecurity required, and then also a testing of those products. But what's missing, which is kind of in a different wheelhouse really, is kind of that master services integration you've talked about. Also, what I really like is the roles and responsibilities and like what's the goals, like the top two, because that's missed a lot from what I've seen is what are we doing this for, and then who's going to operate it. And we, since we're in a very, we don't have a lot of operators, and we don't have a lot of people. We're also understaffed. Despite the DoD's big budget, we are still understaffed when it comes to this stuff. So those two considerations are huge for us that we need to be focusing on why we're doing it, what's the goal, and who's going to be doing the actual work at the end of it.
So that brings up kind of what has the coalition done, and what kind of resources can we offer? There's been a working group as part of the Coalition for Smarter Buildings for the last more than a year, actually. It's gotten together to create a guideline for how to organize this part of the procurement process, the specification part. And we've created a document called Interoperability Framework for Smarter Buildings. Last year at the summit, version 1.0 was announced and provided, made available. It's been updated. There's a whole bunch of folks who've expanded that, made it useful for really big and complicated projects, and also keep an eye on how to make it useful for simple projects at the same time. So 1.1 is available now. You can get it at div2525.org. If you are a buyer, I would suggest reading the introduction. It's the first 10 pages, and say, like, does this ring true for you? Do you want your portfolio to be able to do things like this in this manner? If so, then tell your contractors or tell the designers of your projects, the spec writers or the architects, the engineers, say, I want it done like this. And then they can get the whole document, which is about 100 pages long, and there's details about each of those layers, each of those sections that we shared. Now, I also want to say that this is version 1.1. So there'll be 1.2, there'll be 2.0, yes, please.
Question?
Yes, please. So we invite you to contribute. If you've used 25 in the past and you have good suggestions, or if you have particular ways this would be useful, please let us know. So that's what the other emails.
So I'm a former utility purchasing agent, and some of the complexities of these things, as Jim said, is how do we put costs to these benefits? That is the challenge. Even though your bids, and I've worked on, multi-million-dollar things where it says lowest price isn't it, we're going to evaluate. But then it goes, show me the money. And so we have to look at some of these external things, whether it's going to help you with ESG or whatever, because it's all boiled down, especially in the real estate now. How do we put money to this? And we've been trying for life cycle costs since CABA was established 30 years ago. If we do bid and spec on smart buildings, it ain't smart.
David Katz, can you introduce yourself?
So I'm David Katz. I've been around for 30 years, and I was a purchasing agent both for Bechtel and Johnson. And it's the same thing with our building intelligence quotient. We can have a rating, we can have a benchmark, show me the money. So we have to find ways of doing that.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
And even Division 25, we've bid on jobs where they put whether it's written by a controls company who uses that. But how do we put that in? And does the master spec people, can they help us with that?
I think, David, the key point is we have to change the minds and the perspectives of financial decision makers. Because, if you've always been taught as a finance guy that you need to minimize operating costs, that's the way the entire system is set up. And what we really need to tell people is look, you've already crossed that chasm in terms of IT, right? IT is almost all operating now. It's hardly any of it's capitalized. And because we've converged with IT, you've got to do the same thing here. But it's early in that game, and it's a hard conversation to have because, frankly, it's a conversation we don't have as an industry because most of the people on new construction are basically selling new construction, and that's different people than the people that operate.
Lowest bid and new. Thank you.
Yep. We wanted to, there'll be a lot more about the content of what the new stuff should be. That's going to be in the next few sessions. We wanted to kick off talking about the process because we can eliminate some of these barriers to the process and say like, okay, here's where we insert the content of what to ask for or what we're going to offer. Then we have a better path to higher adoption and smarter portfolios. I think we have one more comment here from the crowd, and then we're going to go to the next session.
Yes, my name is Chris Larry. I'm with EXP. We do a lot of master systems integration work. And the Division 25 is great. One thing we probably should also talk about is there's so many other products that are bought when you bid things. How do you get the smarts into those and make sure that those contractors talk to Division 25? Because Division 25 can do something, but if you don't purchase those things that are smart, then you have a problem. So you have to tie it all together.
Yeah, great point, Chris. We're hoping that that the layers that we outlined in the Smarter Stack can be something to be shown to people who offer products and services in the other divisions so that they're thinking about those too. So this is part of establishing the language to do that. But you're right that there's a lot of cross connections there. So anyway, thank you for the first session here, and on to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you. So one thing that Pete didn't mention, and this applies to the IBB as well, is that these projects are basically open source projects, right? So the Div 2525 is available for anybody to use. So go to div2525.org and download it. So that's sort of a mantra of pretty much everything that we do. So, okay, let's talk about the IBB. So, Rick, you're going to hang around there? Okay. It's going to, all right. So, first question is, what is it and why do we need it? So, IBB stands for Interoperable Building Box. I think about it as a box. In essence, it's open source software. That's what we're building, right? And we've been doing this actually over the past 9 months and made a significant amount of progress. So it's open source software that can go inside a physical device, like a product that would be purchased from a controls vendor or a gateway vendor or something like, or that kind of company. Or it can be software that somebody installs in a virtual environment on-prem. So it can be one of two things. It can be a physical device that you just plug in the wall, or it can be something that you install. The key thing is that it's always located on-prem. And that's really key because one of the big problems about the cloud, if you've heard the conversation over the past 5 or 10 years, is that it's unreliable, it's slow, latency, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff, right? Which is true, because that's just physics, right? But by putting it on-prem, you're then bringing cloud native to the building. That's the whole sort of idea of it. All right, so it's always on-prem. You can see on the right-hand side here, if I can, this is supposed to give me a mouse, there you go. So this is an IBB, so you can see the bottom of it is kind of sticking in the building, and the top of the top is in the cloud, heads in the cloud, and essentially its purpose is to be the interface between the building and the cloud, right? So that's the number one purpose. That's why we need it, and it's a standardized interface between the building and the cloud. These days, you probably find a lot of people installing gateways to do some kind of thing in the cloud, right? So you end up with multiple gateways, and which is not a great thing, especially with respect to cybersecurity and stuff like that, right? So this IBB sort of creates an open platform to host containerized applications, which is what's depicted on the right-hand side. You want to pick up on that?
Well, and some of these words and some of these terms might be new, but I suspect more than we might think. You guys work for companies that are already doing things that are cloud related, or at least cloud aware. We want to point out, though, that again, we're really doing something very specifically, introducing how to do connectivity interoperability using cloud native with a capital C and a capital N. We're literally following and using the techniques and the tools from the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is, again, a part of the Linux Foundation, and we're implementing those software tools. We're, again, blazing the trail. Did we decide path or trail? to show that it's possible. And we're wanting to say, at the end of this, you'll all be sort of invited to participate in how do we move more and more applications. And one of these diagrams, we're going to point out kind of how new applications get brought into this environment.
Yeah. And so if you think about the sort of the benefit for this industry directly is to be able to remotely manage the buildings, right? And that's kind of the other sort of reason why the IBB exists. Okay, so how does it work? What's the architecture? So IBBs are on-prem, right? And we envision that there'll be different sizes of IBB, right? Small, medium, large, right? Depending on the size of the building and the complexity of buildings. I'm going to be demonstrating an IBB, and back there is actually an IBB that's very focused on showing how it can be used in demand response, and we'll actually talk a bit more about that. Right, so there's a whole sort of different types of IBB for different applications that we foresee. But in all cases, you think about them as a peripheral. They need to be managed by something. And they need to be managed by something in the cloud, right? What we call a cloud management platform, right? The interface between the IBB and the cloud management platform is open and standardized. That's really what we've been working on. We're mostly there. And so the interface is open, and we anticipate, Rick, do you want to pick up on this, the second bullet? Platforms to be offered.
For multiple vendors. So again, we talked about a little bit before that everybody that's been working on this works for different companies, but we do anticipate that with the sort of the leadership that we're showing and how to migrate to cloud native, we do expect that there will be more and more vendors, and it's been happening pretty rapidly already, including my day job, Shift Energy. I didn't mention that that's actually who I work for, isn't it? Shift actually has containerized its applications. So in talking to the chief technology officer of the company, he said, are we going to be compatible with this IBB approach? And it's like, yeah, they're already, like Kennedy said, is that it? So all I have to do is containerize. Now, we've got a little bit, we're going to talk a little bit more about the ecosystem of other companies that have made that more possible and more easier, faster. We'll get to that in a minute, Ryan. But the idea of other companies being able to say, okay, to migrate to this platform is fairly straightforward and proven is what we're trying to do.
So there is this cloud management platform, and because to develop this, we actually need one, because otherwise we can't develop it and test it and stuff. We made one. It's called IBB.zone. It's actually at the address IBB.zone. You can head over there. But right now it's for development purposes. So it's really mostly for the group, but you could be part of that, obviously. So we created that essentially as a reference platform, right, of how cloud management platforms are going to look for the IBB. Okay? What does it actually do? Why is this different? And the aim is to make the whole process be plug and play. You know, just like your phone, right? You install an app and it works right there, right? And if it needs to talk to other apps, it does, right? And it's really straightforward and simple. We do it all the time, right? So how does that work? IBB does it in a sort of very sort of special way that's very targeted at the stack and creating value for the purpose at the top here. So imagine an IBB connected to the cloud and connected to a building, fictitious Acme headquarters in Texas. So inside the IBB could be a building automation system software from vendor, whoever, right? And it is southbound going to talk to whatever devices it talks to using whatever protocol it is, right? Typically BACnet these days. You'd also have the circumstance of IP controllers, IP devices that basically plug directly into the IP network of the building, in other words, southbound of the IBB, which is how I've depicted it there. There could be, these are sort of package units and different sort of products that have smarts in them, and they don't really need control systems to manage them. There's also another scenario of IoT. There's been a lot of IoT products being installed in the past few years. A lot of money has gone into that from VCs. And they typically go around all of this, right? It's very hard to go through the BAS, right? Because all the BAS is different and all that kind of stuff. And so they go around it, usually using 5G or 4G or LoRaWAN or whatever. And they go straight to the cloud, maybe with a gateway or not, right? So this is kind of the architecture of what we typically see. So let's imagine that we now want to install an analytics application. We want to do some specific analytics in this building, in Acme. And let's say that that analytics software needs haystack data. It needs to consume haystack data for it to do analytics, its job, right? Now, we're just using haystack as an example. There's nothing very specific about haystack in this architecture. So the way it works in IBB is that when that application is installed, it makes a declaration. And the declaration in English goes something like this. I can consume haystack data about Acme. Same. That's what I can do. That's what I've been designed to do, and that's what I can consume. Okay? So it makes that declaration to the IBB, to the broker inside the IBB. One of the key parts of the IBB is a broker. So it makes that declaration to the broker. Now, all of the other systems that I mentioned earlier would have gone through the same process. When they were onboarded, when they were installed, they would be making similar declarations. And what the broker does is it tries to match them. Right? So the broker looks at all of the different apps, all the different systems, and it finds that this one down the bottom actually made the declaration that says, I can provide haystack about Acme. So the broker says, this guy can provide, this guy needs it. They're both in the same context, Acme, connect them, and data flows. That is the plug and play part of ABB, and we'll see that. And so other systems would make the same declarations. Now, the BAS could do the same thing. And maybe a month later or down the road, the IoT could make the same thing. And the sort of the interesting thing here is that the analytics application is just focused on analytics. That's what Pete was saying. It's just focused on that app layer. Right? It doesn't care where all the other data comes from. It's just made this declaration, and it's expecting the IBB and the broker to match it. Do you want to expand on that? No. What's the next slide? The next slide is the demo. So I'm going to try and show this. And as I said, I did pray to the demo gods, so we'll see what happens.
Well, I think everybody gets that the point of the analytics is an example of an application that can just do its thing because the access to data has been provided by a standardized way of bringing systems or resources to the table. And in the same way as it brought system, whatever that system XYZ was at the bottom, it could have been an IBB app that was connected to maintenance management software or to some other kind of data system. And but providing a framework for that sort of interaction is the key to what the IBB does. It materially represents bringing cloud native to our space.
Yeah, and it does that by managing containerized applications, right? So we got all the pieces. Right, so let's see. So this is the IBB zone that I mentioned earlier, right? What it's showing you right now is that there is an IBB. I'll just start there, actually. Let's get rid of these graphs for now. So this is an IBB that's represented in this IBB zone. So I'm managing an IBB. This IBB is actually in Virginia. It's actually in a Google data center, but it would ultimately be in somebody's building, right? And it has an OpenADR application that's been installed in it that is from Skycentrix. It's actually a the same application as what Tristan is showing back there, right? That's actually running this OpenADR application in what he has there is a box. It's called a Super Skybox. It's the same software, same architecture with IBB, right? So I'm showing one that's in Virginia somewhere, and he shows one right there on the table. And this is another application that comes from a company called IoTech Systems. Ryan will talk about this later. Let me just log in there. And so this is what's called Edge Central, which is the name of the product, running in the IBB, being viewed by me in Chicago across the internet. The one thing that's important about the IBB is that it has no open ports. Right? The IBB is a box, right? And it's designed not to have open ports, and open ports are really bad from a cyber perspective, right? So we've created technology to be able to basically tunnel out of the IBB into my screen right here. Right? There's another application here, which is a simulation. This is a simulation from Tracy's company, Ingenuity. This is a restaurant application. And just for fun, I created an application for a wiki, so you can type stuff in this for notes, but that's not really very interesting. And really, these two applications are talking to the OpenADR one, right? And if I go to the graph to actually show the graph, you can actually see this, if I can move things around. So I'm at OpenADR. I'm looking at OpenADR. And there is a connection profile. So connections are basically what we call these links between the different systems, between OpenADR and Edge Central and EVO IoT, which is the Ingenuity system. So connection profile is named this, right? It's actually created by Carly back there. And what it's doing is the OpenADR is providing information of that type to Edge Central and EVO IoT. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. So this is
We're going to actually have Carly talk about some of the work that she did to actually containerize a couple of the products that are here, or the systems that are here, in a second.
OpenADR is a standard for doing demand response.
Good question, though. How many people knew what OpenADR was? Most. There you go. And then 3.0 is the new specification. And in a second, Carly's going to talk about what she did to containerize that and another app that I think Danto's going to show.
Yeah, so what I'm actually going to do is just show the dynamics of this, is that you see here that it's talking through another profile called the price one to a thing called NanoEdge. NanoEdge is actually an application that's kind of a fake application because the developer, they haven't actually created the software behind it. But from a usability perspective, it all works. So what I'm going to do is actually going to delete this NanoEdge. I'm going to just go remove it. I don't want it anymore. And if I go to OpenADR, you'll see now that the OpenADR is talking through the price, but there's nobody there, right? So there's no match I was talking about earlier. So there's no match. So if I actually install it back, so this is the installation process of an application. It's basically a store. So these are all the different IBB apps that we have in the store. So I'm going to install NanoEdge back. And you see here that this is how it's declaring itself. I was talking about declaration. This is what it says. This uses that, and it needs that to operate. That's the declaration it makes as it's being installed. So if I go next, and then it's going to ask me, what do I want to call it? And I can say, I'll just do NanoEdge 2, we'll see the difference. And you'll see it installed in the IBB. It's now running there. And you'll see it's already connected to the OpenADR. So if I go to the OpenADR, it's also connected to the price. So what I've done is I've shown dynamics of what the IBB is designed to do. You can remove stuff, you can add stuff, and this can happen all the time, right? If the application needs it. And you can install all sorts of different applications in the IBB. So I'm going to install something, just navigating around the store, and I'm going to install this, something that maybe all of us have heard of, is this product called Niagara. So Niagara Tritium, I think last year, announced that they're containerizing their Niagara, right? So with the help of Ryan, thank you, we worked on bringing that into the IBB, right? So I'm saying I want Niagara. Anybody worked with Niagara in this room? So you know Niagara.
That's going to be a lot of hands. Anybody be a past president of Tritium in the room? No, one or two, yeah.
And has anybody tried to use the container, the Niagara container? Okay.
Yeah.
And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to install that container in this IBB in Virginia. So I'm going to go next. I think it's going to ask me for a name. Come on, demo gods. Now you can talk.
Now Carly gets to talk.
Okay.
So, so we found out that Niagara had Tritium had a containerized version of Niagara. We also found out that OADR 3.0 was being released, and we said, how can we get those ready for demonstration as quickly as possible? And so, all of us are great experts on Kubernetes and containers and stuff like that, and I just went straight to my keyboard and said, no. But where do we find somebody off the bench that can come in and help get some of that technical work done? And is it really going to be hard? According to Kennedy, no, not that hard. Carly was, I don't know, between jobs or available to stand up or take a mic and tell your story.
And by the way, it's now come up. Obviously, the internet's a bit slow here. I need to give it a name, and I say install it.
Yeah, my name's Carly. I'm a back-end software engineer. Basically only ever worked in the cloud native world because I became a software engineer in like late 2010s. And yeah, I quit my job. I was like I care a lot about like using my powers for good, by which I mean energy efficiency and renewable energy. And my dad over there saw Kubernetes on my resume and he was like, interesting. Asked me to start coming to the IBB meetings, and it was really like a powerful idea. And then I was working on implementing OpenADR, not necessarily for the IBB, but it turns out that like once you implement something, and as a modern software engineer, like you're probably going to be maybe developing in Docker already just because you're on a Mac and you want to develop in Linux or something. Like containerizing is just like probably a part of your workflow separately from like a whole new task that you have to do. So I containerized the OpenADR app, and it was in a container. And then to make it compliant, it just was a very good candidate for being part of an IBB demo and part of showing the vision of an IBB, because OpenADR, right, it's about sending signals to a lot of different devices that can respond in their own way, and reporting then those, like getting data back and reporting it back up. It automatically benefits from communicating like to multiple different devices from multiple different companies, which is where the IBB shines. So I started out, so once it's containerized, there's basically two more steps that you have to do. You have to make a Helm chart so that it can be installed into Kubernetes, which is pretty straightforward. And then, and Kennedy would say, like, there's many engineers that are skilled in Kubernetes. Like, that's just a checkbox on LinkedIn now. And then you have to make a connection profile, or, maybe as we get further along in this community, you could just go look at the existing connection profiles and kind of pick from the list and be like, oh, I can just slide in to use this one that already exists. Because I was an early contributor, I basically looked at the OpenADR spec. There's obviously many, many things that OpenADR can do, and we didn't want to make a super specific connection profile for each of those things. So I started just with 2 connection profiles, one for price signals and one for simple level signals, which are up there right now. So basically, if you need to define a new connection profile that you think will be useful because you're to other apps, then you define that and you register it with your IBB host zone. And then, and then you have to make your app kind of on install communicate with the IBB broker. But once it's communicating with the IBB broker, then you basically like don't really have to worry about it anymore. You don't have to make a new connection every time the other apps are installed, which is I think where the true power comes. Like you've kind of said what you are putting out into the world, and then you've published the specification of what your outward communication looks like, and then other people, other entities can just come in and start consuming those signals. Yeah.
Thank you. So you went quite geeky with you went quite geeky, which is great, which needs to be done by software developers to put
Okay.
stuff into IBB. But the whole mission of the IBB is to do all of that, to hide all of that, so that when you actually need to install an app, you just install an app, not much different to how you install an app on your phone, right? It's
Right.
actually better than your phone because it actually automatically establishes the connections.
Yeah, and it's kind of like on your phone when you install an app and then it's like, oh, can I access your camera roll or something? Like that's like the registering additional connections. And I think that as far as I know, this doesn't exist in the building space yet, so it's pretty exciting.
It does now.
Yes, yeah. Thank you, Carly.
Thank you, Carly.
And thank you for all your contribution. It's been great. And so, by the way, Niagara's here, is running in the IBB. You notice that all of the other apps have some kind of HTML UI, the EV1 and the Edge Central. This one doesn't, because it doesn't, right? Because it is a huge containerized application of the Niagara stack, the whole stack, right? And it's all in Java, so it's actually, for it to be used, you actually need the workbench, right? The workbench doesn't work inside a browser, right? So it has to be other sort of ways of doing it. So we think about this as sort of like a hybrid, right? To actually make something like Niagara that is not inherently designed with cloud native in mind, make it so that it becomes cloud native. So that's really the powerful thing that we think we can achieve with that. That's kind of the demo. I'll be around during the reception to kind of dig in some more. But let's go back to sort of do a bit of a recap. Right? So important thing is that it's designed for the trades. It's not designed for DevOps. It's not, Carly's great, but it's not designed for Carly. It's designed for people in this industry to use. Right? The marketplace or the store is essentially a store of your applications. IBB itself does not have any applications. It doesn't do anything. It's just a box. Like a box, it's an empty box. You put stuff in it. It's your stuff. That's the way you think about it. That's why the box metaphor is actually quite interesting. Talk about connections. And connections aren't really sort of APIs. I mean, they may well be technically APIs, but we need to think of them as a way of conveying a business purpose, right? Like in the case of the DR I was demonstrating, right? There's a DR server, and there are these systems that want to participate in the DR functionality, and that's where a connection profile is created to do just that, right? So it's really about defining a purpose of why two systems need to talk with each other to do something specific. And it's also designed to facilitate collaboration. So if I jump back in here, you'll see that on the right-hand side here, is a feed. And I see here Ryan was doing this and Ryan was doing that. He modified that so I can go straight to there, et cetera, et cetera. So it's designed to be collaborative in nature. This IBB instance is actually accessible by anybody in the IBB team. You can actually see that whole list here. These are all the different people. Many of them are here.
Nobody's messing with it right now, right?
What? Yeah, so it's designed to be collaborative. And again, IBB is on-prem, right, for the reasons I stated, but the users can be location agnostic. It doesn't matter where they are. All they need is a browser and internet and the necessary credentials to attach it, to log in, to connect to the cloud management platform that's actually managing that. And that's really sort of the other way of thinking about the platform, management platform, is it is the place where you define your security policies, how everything's going to work. That's where it's done. Right? So the IBBs just connect to that. So you have the benefit of that. The last point to make is that all of this is proof of concept right now. We'll talk a little bit more about the sort of the timeline a bit later, but we obviously want input from the community. And that's it. I think that's the end. Oh, yes. Well, we'll get to that at the end, but we do have the demo, pretty much what you see back there and what you've seen on the screen at the booth. And the booth is S6325. It is the Landmark booth. And I'm sure you'll talk about what that means and how that makes sense. You will now?
Next. Okay. You're up next.
You're next, okay. So, yeah, so that's the demo and a preview of what this is all about. So that's it. We need to move on.
Cool. So we got a little technical, but that's what we warned you. That's what we've been doing for the last year, is diving in to say, let's blaze this trail. Let's show that the pieces can be done and assembled. Next panel is going to have a bunch of the people that have been spending that time and working to get these demos together. And the focus of it's going to be the ecosystem of different companies and different systems that are coming together to show the value of the IBB and of cloud native computing. So with that, you guys, that group, get up here. What's the score, Kennedy?
Beginning of the fourth quarter. Detroit 24.
I didn't see the T-shirt, sorry.
24. Tampa Bay 17.
Yeah, Detroit.
I'll just stand up here. Is that good? Is this one on too? Okay. You can squeeze over. We might have one extra. Is that everybody?
Rick's always hiding. You're up there, Rick.
All right. Okay, let me jump in. First of all, thank you again, everyone, for taking your time out of your Sunday here to come by and listen to us all talk a little bit about stuff that we are very excited about and we've been working on for quite a while. In this session here today, we're kind of hoping to bring some of the technology we heard about, some of the specification procurement piece of it, all together and talk a little bit more globally about the ecosystem. And that reminds me, before we jump in, I wanted to take a little survey, maybe a little exercise just to wake everybody up too. How many of you here in the audience, by show of hands, are in the specifying architect side of the business? All right, how many are in the manufacturing side, deliver a product of some kind? All right, more of those. How about system integrators, master system integrators? All right, good mix.
How about end users, building owners, that side of things? A few of those as well. Good. All right, so we're going to try to touch a little bit, and I could probably go on with that list, by the way, but you can see there's a pretty good representation of a spectrum here, and we'll try to touch a little bit on that, and we've got several of those represented here. A lot of, I think, what we have on this side is the vendor side of things, and one of the things that we wanted to make sure to emphasize is the need for that collaboration and involvement in moving this forward here in the industry. It all starts with, this whole thing is a bit of a chicken and egg. Building owners can't ask for this until there are products that can be delivered, and nobody wants to build a product and make that investment until they know building owners are going to ask for that. So we're trying to break that cycle a little bit here. I'm going to let each of you introduce yourself. I'll start. Again, my name's Tracy Markey. I'm CEO, founder of Ingenuity Systems. I think that picture of me is about as old as my company, which is turning 30 this year. We are involved in a number of different things here. We've been helping with this from our platform. We've been involved with energy management for a very long time. And we have a platform that does energy management for restaurants, convenience stores. But I also have a very long history as the chairman of the board of directors for Lawnmark International. And in our couple of decades of history in Lawnmark, one of the key things and key tenets and foundational beliefs has always been about interoperability and bringing that multi-vendor kind of philosophy where things are shared, data is shared. And what's been really interesting for me, from my point of view, both as a vendor and in my role as Lawnmark, has been here is a re-energized effort in the industry, again, to try to make things much more interoperable and open from a controls standpoint. And I know Jim and I had counter positions here between BACnet and Lawn. This is a little like cats and dogs living together here. Many friendly discussions, interesting discussions over the year between the two different approaches. So maybe we'll hear a little bit about that. With that, what I want to do is kind of jump in here, I think. Is this the right clicker to move things forward? There we go. So we've put together a few preloaded questions. I'm just going to put them up here. But I would welcome others in the audience to contribute too. What I want to do is let you guys chime in on one of these that maybe strikes home. Fred and I were talking earlier at the table, and I know there's a couple from you, Fred. Why don't you kick us off here and tell us a little bit about your background, your perspective, and one on here touches your world a little bit.
Absolutely. Fred Gordy. I am with Michael Baker International. We're a firm, MEP. I've been in the controls industry about 23 years, but I started before that in IT. And over the years, about 10 years ago is when I started investing my time into cybersecurity. So I come from a cybersecurity and risk perspective. I'm actually a national practice lead at Michael Baker for building systems. So like Tracy was saying, we were talking before, I want to say something that it's kind of an analogy. I like analogies, right? So what we're trying to do, too many people treat it as a relay race, where you hand the baton off and then your hands are off the wheel, so to speak, after that, and you don't pay attention. Well, in my world, every end to end has got to have some accountability when you're doing the design side, implementation side, and then when it's turned over, you do commissioning, but then there's also that ongoing situation. So if you're familiar with Navy SEALs and BUDS, which I'm not a Navy SEAL, if you've ever seen any of it, they have this huge telephone pole that all the guys have got it in their arms, and everybody has to pull their weight. In most of the Navy SEAL exercise, it's everybody's got to pull their weight and work along beside each other. So that's one of the biggest things that I want to say is it's an effort that each one of us have to carry but we don't have to carry it alone. So with that being said, the one thing about the IBB that was very intriguing to me was one of the things from a cybersecurity perspective is knowing what you have, know how it's connected, know who has access. That's the three primary things. If you're asking yourself, how secure am I? Well, if you can't answer yes to all three of those, you're not. Well, with the IBB, this is a centralized way to not only see your systems, you can see who has access, you can control that access, and then also I see potential for this to actually be able to integrate into things like CISA. That's where all these alerts and stuff come from. NVD, which is National Vulnerability Database. So from a security perspective, I'm very excited about the possibilities that exist with the IBB.
So a slight step forward or evolution in this whole thing, you would say then, in terms of your world in cybersecurity?
Absolutely, yes.
You know, it's interesting. One of the things we haven't talked a lot about here today is, you know, why is this happening now, or what's the history behind this? And there is an evolution of control systems in terms of networking and silos and interoperability. And Jim, I know you've had roles both in your day-to-day company and in BACnet. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that as well.
Absolutely, Tracy. So, you know, when we look at the IBB, I think it's a very important evolutionary step. And from the perspective of BACnet, we're already ready to meet that challenge, because BACnet Secure Connect and managed BACnet technologies and systems around that are effectively cloud native already. So there's a perfect pathway to take existing systems and existing buildings through BACnet SC and have those be ready to play with the IBB right away. Now, some of the existing BACnet systems, BACnet IP, BACnet MSTP, we're working as a community now to look at solutions for how that can be brought into the IBB as well. But you know, as far as BACnet goes, BACnet SC, which is the future, is a cloud native technology natively. So I'll leave it at that.
All right. And I saved you two for last because you guys have been most recently involved with implementing some of this. So first, maybe, Ryan, give me a little bit of background on your company and what you do and your perspective on this and the work that you did on this.
Yep, my name is Ryan Brothers. I work for a company called IoTech Systems. We deliver OT connectivity, containerized OT connectivity out of the box. You can think of us kind of as the Red Hat to the open source project called EdgeX Foundry. That is a Linux Foundation project maintained by them. We contribute to that project heavily, and we are very involved. So our software being containerized already was essentially took maybe 2 hours to implement into an IBB app, created the Helm chart, and with the help of Carly and Andy, it was effortless, to say the least. How we have been delivering OT connectivity for the past 5 years just made sense. It falls in line with cloud native. It's a Docker Compose file. You stand it up. You stand up the services you need. If you only have BACnet devices, all you need is the BACnet connector. We offer many connectors in containers to deal with the OT connectivity side of things. And it's not just about data migration to the cloud or anything like that. We do command and control via REST APIs or MQTT. So there's a lot of different layers there. But I come from an HVAC technician background, actually. So I started when I was very young. My dad owned an HVAC business, and then I got into controls after I went to college for computer science. It just made sense that my passion for computer science translates into automation controls. So from the perspective of a controls technician, we all know if you've been trying to hire controls technicians for the past 3 or 4 years, it's getting very, very thin. And the guys that are the best of the best are starting to retire, or they don't want to deal with it anymore, or whatever. So the IBB is a step in that evolution of workforce shortage, talent shortage. If you can just install an IBB app, connect your devices to that IBB, and have it managed cloud native, you don't have to have the skills of Kubernetes or Helm or Docker or Linux or anything like that. It just makes sense to be able to install this app, have it connect with the connection profiles, and start translating data across those applications. The community we have here is a lot like the open source community. I mean, in building automation, it's been proprietary for so long that that's just kind of the way people think. You've got JCI, even Niagara to an extent is proprietary, because as we saw, you have to build it yourself. So it's proprietary in the sense that the skill ceiling is really, really high. The skill floor is really, really low. So I'm sure people have seen Niagara installations that don't work, you know? So it's having an open source community around building controls, it just makes a lot of sense in moving the industry forward.
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. You see this impacting Joe field worker and them using that kind of this technology and this platform moving forward. This isn't just for engineers and coders and so forth. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right. And I'm going to lead you into Tristan. So SkyCentric, tell us a little bit about your background, your experience on this, and if you want to add to what Ryan said. For sure.
Well, I'm definitely, what I got out of Ryan and what I think is really good for everybody to know is think about your phone, like people have been saying, right? A lot of us use apps, and we've never designed an app, we've never engineered an app, we've never coded an app, but they're super useful, and we mix and match the way we choose to do it. And Ryan was talking about how historically, from what I understand, the model was that if you were wanting to be a Siemens MSI or writing control code for any of those big 50-year-old BMSs, then you had to go to school or training for 6 months before you could kind of walk in the door and begin. And, you know, Carly was able to jump with her skills just coming out of college and knowing all the modern tools. She was able to jump in on the engineering level and be super helpful. And the idea that Anto and others have created an architecture where for all of us, there's just going to be apps. And you download the apps that you need, and you get a lot of stuff happening. So that's super exciting. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do and how we're doing it. So SkyCentrics came from the grid signal, grid interactive efficient building world. And when Gary Katz walked up and asked his question, and apparently has some utility experience as well. So he said, where's the money? Where's the value proposition, right? So I don't know how many of you know, but there's a big world change coming not only in buildings, but in the energy transition. And for 100 years, our buildings have had machines that go on and off randomly. Your HVAC has a set point, you have boilers and chillers, and they're just going on, off whenever they want. There's a whole renewable energy world and a carbon notice world that's coming that says, hey, the sun isn't always going to be shining, the wind isn't always blowing, sometimes the grid is dirty, sometimes it's clean. We need you to use more energy now and less energy later. And those signals have to come from the internet. So we combine those signals plus the weather, and we orchestrate the building machines to use more energy when it's a good idea, and the grid is clean and cheap, and that saves money right away for the building owner and manager. And so in the residential world, there's sort of a USB port for machines called the EcoPort. And SkyCentrics is the specialist in making a module, Wi-Fi, now cellular, that plugs into that port and makes that water heater be connected and getting those grid signals. And we've always wanted, in AHR, there are many committees now, and writing AHRI 1380, 1490, all these funky letters and numbers that are basically saying we want the machines of the commercial building world to be able to take those same signals, use more energy, use less energy. That world is coming. We've got a skybox that gives those machines, it talks Modbus and PACnet out of one end, and it talks OpenADR and EcoPort out of the other end. And so think about it, right? We have a cloud that can send grid signals to things, and we want to be able to have machines that we can connect to. So Tracy has a whole world of connecting to machines, and just by making our app be IBB compliant and Tracy's app IBB compliant, we're about to send signals to all of his machines and all of his buildings and then eventually others like Symmetrics and IoTech. And we don't have to do anything new. We already became IBB compliant, they became IBB compliant. So huge value coming for us.
I listened to the two of you talk, reminded me another quick survey. How many of you have downloaded an app onto your phone and use apps, right? That's
Not
kind
a
of
vote.
yeah. Anyone who hasn't, probably lying. How many of you have written the code that goes underneath or created an app that people use? Okay, this kind of illustrates, I think, a little bit about what we're talking about. The effort here is to make it as easy as downloading an app so the entire ecosystem can benefit and use this. There'll be vendors who will supply this part, but ultimately there'll be field users, people in the field. It's as simple as downloading an app in there. And Jim, I want to come back to you because you're a box manufacturer, among other things, and part of your business is very high-end analytics with higher-end buildings. Tell us a little bit about how you see this impacting your business in the future and what's the value here.
Sure. So we have two businesses. One is analytics, as Tracy pointed out. The other is BACnet networking, where we're particularly interested in cybersecurity. So for both of those applications, it turns out that the IBB makes an excellent point to run diagnostics on cybersecurity across many types of networks and report that information. From an analytics standpoint, if I look at the Smarter Stack and the Div 25 stuff that we talked about, if we're standardizing on that metadata, now the IBB becomes a perfect place to collect data from for analytics. With all those things, as Anto mentioned, in terms of connection profiles laid out, so that we don't have to do a lot of heavy lifting to get that information into one place. So anyone who's in the commercial application space like analytics will have a much lower technical lift than we've had in the past 25 years to do that.
So you don't see this as replacing necessarily anything that you do then? This is more of an augmentation?
I would say that, but I would also say that, the time constants in this industry are very long, and my analytics business survives on the installed base, which will be static until I'm dead. So I'm not particularly concerned about how it will affect my analytics business, and positively disposed to how it's going to affect my cybersecurity business. Make sense?
It does. It does. Fred, I'll come back to you again, a little bit from your side of things. How far away are we from people being able to ask for this? What is it going to take to kind of get us over that hump?
That's a very good question. No, I mean, that's something that we've approached in Michael Baker is, we do have a lot of legacy stuff out there. And even with the IBB and making some of the legacy stuff to be able to integrate with it ultimately, when you are engineering changes to your systems or new systems, I don't want to say are easy, but when you bake in cybersecurity into a new system, it is much cheaper than coming in and putting it on the back end. To kind of maybe go to this last question down here, who are the stakeholders that are benefiting from it? I want to say that one of the things that in the years that I've been doing assessments and I've done them in the US, Canada, and overseas, is 75+% of the systems that we've assessed have zero backup or really bad backups. There is no disaster recovery. And when you stop and go through one of these situations with a client, you cannot know the financial impact for some time. So the IVP, being able to centralize this, I can, kind of like with your apps, when you get a new phone, what happens? You just log in and there's all your apps. Well, I can, if you want to listen to some horror stories, I got them where, backups, the integrator had to come in and he had a backup in one particular case. He was supposed to be backing it up every 3 months. And this was in 2022. The last backup was in 2008 on October the 6th. So the integrator had to completely rebuild the system. And I mean, I know you've probably seen that as well. So the bottom line here is I can see a lot of potential for money saved. It's a cost avoided more than it is money saved.
Cybersecurity industry is afraid of new things sometimes. So why would this, and I'll open this up, Fred, you can start up it to everybody. Why would this be embraced by that side of the industry?
Well, from a cybersecurity perspective, like I said, you got to know what you have, and you got to know how it's connected. I mean, that is, I don't care if you're using NIST, ISA 62443, any of the standards, that is fundamental to all of them. So from that standpoint, the cybersecurity community, whenever you go in and do an assessment, I love this one, what do you have? And they'll provide me a list. I did a thing, not picking on Johnson Control, but did this thing, the guy said there's only 4 devices on this network. We did a scan, there were 32, and there was a Raspberry Pi on there. So anyway, this as long as it's presented that way, that it's enabling, making my job easier, and making and like I think somebody said earlier, that this is more of an IT approach, then IT's going to embrace it, but it's also going to give them visibility into the systems.
Makes sense. Ryan, you've always worked in this space, more from an IT view of the world. Do you see this, how do you see this rolling out in the real world here, from your perspective?
I think it'll get some initial pushback. A lot of people are stuck in their ways, especially in the building automation industry. They want to put in a JACE, they want to do their graphics, and then move on to the next job. That's what they want to do. At that point, it's the operators. It's that relay race of, here you go. I trained you as much as I can. Here you go, operator. Good luck. Call me if there's any issues. And inevitably, there are issues, always. So I think adoption in the MSI space is going to take a little bit longer than even at the portfolio level, at the C level. I think they will see the value more so than the field installation technicians, because there's still a learning curve, as easy as we want it to be. It's not quite there yet, but if you've been doing the same thing lockstep for 10 years, that's what you know how to do. That's what you're efficient at. So I see a little bit of pushback, even with the MSIs that I still have contact with. They're involved with Monday Live and the coalition, but they always ask the same question: How do we learn this? How do we learn the IT approach without getting into Kubernetes, Helm, and all the nerdy stuff that we like to do? So I think there is going to be a little bit of hesitation, not necessarily, no, I don't want to do that. It'll be hesitantly adopted as it gets spec'd into more jobs.
Tristan, I see you nodding a lot. You guys are fairly specialized in a niche where you do your work, but you've jumped onto this work pretty quickly, pretty easily. Maybe we're kind of up to our time, so close us out here with a thought about why people should be paying attention, and where's the opportunity to innovate on this?
Sure. I asked an architect a few years ago how many building machines were connected to the internet. It's typically less than 2%, I've been told. After 50 years of BMSs, there's 85% of buildings that don't have a BMS. So there's this huge world of needing to connect to buildings. You can't send grid signals saying when to use more or less energy unless you can connect to machines. So to me, this is all about connecting to machines a lot faster. And everybody should know, in terms of where's the money, the utilities are dying to incentivize these things so that they can send grid signals. So that money's coming in. And by the time you've connected the machines, from what I understand, the building owners, certainly of those 85% of the buildings that have no BMS, are dying to pull out their phone and see their buildings and see their machines. So connectivity is coming, like Glenn Allmendinger said, connectivity is coming. And we can leapfrog the whole small silos, one cloud per machine, to an ecosystem like Apple and Google. And we can go all the way to the open, interoperable that even Apple, Google have done with Matter in the residential space. So in the commercial space, open, interoperable, everything connected, everything talking in a cyber secure way.
So our cheese is moving. It sounds like. It's our time. I do want to close out with a reminder of what I brought up earlier. Lawnmark has a booth here that this year is a collaborative effort between Monday Live, C4SB, OpenADR, and Lawnmark, and you can come by and see a live demo and ask much more detailed questions here. So I'm kind of out of time. I don't know if I have time for questions or.
It may be covered.
You can ask while we're transitioning, maybe.
It may be covered, but bringing, because I'm looking at the utility, we have a $1,200 a kilowatt incentive for peak reduction, to build on what you just said, and nobody knows how to get it, really. But my question is, how do you bring AI into this to allow that machine learning, to be able to see how poorly the equipment's running? But maybe you're covering it later. Thanks.
Well, I wanted to answer that because of what Jim said, right? I mean, Jim's got a whole analytics side, and from what I understand, the more machines delivering the more data through connectivity, the better the analytics, the better the peak shaving, the better the value proposition.
Yeah.
I think there'll just be a competitive market with a lot of vendors competing to show whether it's rules-based, artificial intelligence, what have you, better value propositions.
Investing in Brainbox and all these things, and they're saying, you're not going to write the code, it's going to be machine learning.
Well, whether it is or not, different vendors, as long as we have this open ecosystem, will have a better opportunity to compete.
Yeah, I think that's important to understand. This is framework in nature. And the more, from an AI standpoint, the more data, the better view of the world AI has, the better the AI performs, right? And this is all about making it easier and faster to bring all that availability to everybody, to the market. All right, thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it.
Lions. Next session is about workforce. And Steve and Melissa are going to introduce themselves, or Steve already introduced himself. And you're going to look for the clicker for the slides. There it is. Okay.
All right, first we have a little icebreaker. All right, I want everybody to stand up. Let's get some energy in this room. All right. Now, nothing we've talked about today could be accomplished without people. And the people in this room are powerful to accomplish great things. But I'd like for you to sit down if you were born before 1980. Awesome. So what we have to do is we have to get this room more balanced and bring in more people with diverse ideas to answer David's question. How do we bring in AI? We've got to find the who. We've got to get the people that know how to do things and envision things differently. So today we're going to talk about a little bit about the history, and then we're going to talk about what we're doing today and where we're headed tomorrow in this industry with workforce and people.
So I would have been one of the guys, of course, who sat down. And so when I entered this industry, the picture was the one on the left, okay? So I joined this little company called Andover Controls in 1981, and that was the exciting box that we introduced at that time called the AC256. And we were trying to replace pneumatic thermostats. Pneumatic thermostats are still out there today. It's quite an industry we have, isn't it? So quite something. But I want to point out one of the things about the conversation we're having right now is the user experience. So those two devices on the left, what was the user experience? You literally walked up to the device or the panel, and you might look at a light, or you might have an override switch. That was your user experience. Okay? There might be a dumb terminal that that a facilities engineer could look at and get some kind of a cryptic readout of what was going on in the panel, but that was the extent of it. Where are we today, 30, 40 years later? We have a much sophisticated desktop experience where you can have multiple desktops and you can have a room full of them from each of your standalone systems, but we're in a world of desktops. And so why is that? And why do we want to, so the picture of the person working at their desktop, what's wrong with that picture? And the answer to that is that we designed all these systems with the idea in mind that computing need to be on-prem, in the building. And we've done a very good job of that. And that isn't per se going to totally go away. I mean, we're going to continue to have standalone controllers doing things specific to the building. But in the meantime, what's happened is that the computing industry itself has moved, as I alluded to earlier in this conversation, it's moved to the cloud. So the entire technology platform, if you will, is no longer premise-based, or what was originally called client-server. You know, when you go to buy your Microsoft Office, you don't put an Exchange server in your building anymore. You get Office 365, or if you do have Exchange, it's in Azure. So there's been this tremendous shift, and it's occurred in a very relatively short period of time. And that's the reality of the world we're living in today. And so from a user perspective, we've made the statement already that the idea that I'm going to sit at a console like that and operate my building, to some limited degree, that's true. But the reality is this is the device that everybody's going to be using to run their building, and they need to be able to do that, as I depict in the picture, anywhere. So that phone, whether I'm in the building, I'm at home, I'm on the road, it shouldn't matter. I should be able to get to anything and everything from my phone and be able to do my job, whatever my job is as somebody responsible for the building, or if I'm a provider, a systems integrator or service provider, I'm going to want to use the phone because that's become the device of the user. And the statistics I mentioned earlier, the 6 trillion or 6 billion of these devices that are in play is the reason why this has become the tool of choice for computing from the user experience perspective. So that's the lead-in I wanted to raise here in saying that the accessibility is now enabled by the internet. There's 5 billion internet connections out there, and the user device is the phone. And yes, desktops have succeeded. There's 2 billion of those out there, but they pale in comparison now to the phone. So we're saying this is where the computing industry has gone. Let's embrace it. Let's get on board. I want to thank I particularly want to thank Anto and the team of individuals who put this IBB demo together. Recognize that all that work was done on a volunteer basis. And so I really hope that those of you who, when you leave today and go to wherever you're going, spread the message. Help us get the message out there, because this is a shift that we want to see happen. And with just this volunteer effort, we demonstrated, I think, very profoundly how real this is and how we can achieve this new paradigm in a relatively short period of time, and it's good for everybody in this community. So with that, the point of the workforce driving this is because the workforce are users who are using these devices, and their education is no longer in the old paradigms of computing, it's in cloud computing, and Carly, was that her name? Yeah. Carly couldn't have been a better example of what the younger workforce looks like coming into the computing industry, and they look at what we're doing, and I know cloud. I don't do cloud. I don't do client server. What's that, right? And so understanding that is why we need to make this shift.
So last year, if you were here, raise your hand if you were here. I know you've done it before, but okay. So last year with the, would you go on?
There you go.
Yeah. So last year we were talking about demand and supply. My name is Melissa Boutwell, and I'm president of Automation Strategy and Performance. And our company is the largest and fastest growing employer group in the automation industry, connecting employers with workforce solutions that help them scale technology and solutions for their clients. Now, to give you context of what that means in my career, I started out in advanced manufacturing. And in advanced manufacturing, we were automating and moving facilities across the ocean. Today, we're reshoring them, but it was about scaling production. Then, moving into energy and utilities, we had many different forms of automation that went into the space of grid-connected communities. Here, at AHR, there's more than just building automation going on here. We have refrigeration systems, we have all different types of manufactured use of heating, air, and refrigeration, and we have to think differently about our products and our technology. So when we look at that from a demand and supply, we're looking for people that help us think differently. Last year, I didn't realize that this was, we talked about how we attract talent, how we upskill talent, retain, and that there are big shifts in demographics, and that 10,000 people a day are retiring out of industry. And so how is our industry going to move forward, and what are we going to do to capture the opportunities ahead of us? So last year, we focused on demand, and that there was great demand in this industry for people that had skill and had talent. This year, we're going to talk a little bit about supply. One of the things our company does is we provide consultative services that do a lot of research and analytics on what is the balance of supply and demand of talent and skill in industry. And we know that we have done year-over-year analytics for many years, and demand is slowing down. There are fewer people with fewer job openings, but the job openings that are there are persistently vacant. They're continuously hard to fill. And so when we think about that, we are looking at ways to reimagine what we can do with the supply of people that we have. If you can put all the things on there. We are looking at reskilling. So what would it look like to take HVAC and look at it from the perspective of precision agriculture, indoor agroponics, other ways that we use technology that we have in this room to expand our capability, expand our reach. To do that, we have to find people that are energizing, people that have ideas and passion and skill that we might not have brought into the industry in 1988 when I started in this industry. We need people that think about things completely different than we do. And so today, when we look at the supply of talent that we have in this room and the supply of talent that we have in this building, what are we doing to magnetize people to want to work with us? We have to be exciting. We have to be doing things that matter. We have to be changing issues people care about. So when you look at that, and you think about it in the context of some of the different agencies that we consult with, I have the best job on the planet. I get to connect people and technology to make things happen that folks think can't happen. But when you look forward and you think about what is the procurement policy for hiring people in our industry, if you work for a government agency, it ain't so easy. We work with federal agencies to help them figure out how to get these skills into federal employees. How do you do that with the salary ranges and the laws of federal employment? What does that look like at state level and municipal level? What does it look like for small employers versus large employers? Those are things we have to do to think differently. And so if you think about when you leave this room today, all the things we talked about today, every single one of them are impossible without brilliant people with human energy focused on solving a problem. So there are 3 things that you can do. Next steps to envision what you would like to be able to say about the people that work at your organization in 2025. For the past 7 years, our company has been embedding IT skills in the OT workforce. We are equipping the OT workforce with next generation IT skills. But what is really exciting is that we're embedding the knowledge of the OT workforce in other areas that didn't even know we existed. And so if you think about the fact that OT is a part of critical infrastructure in this country, we matter. And it's us that make the food systems move. It's us that keep people comfortable in buildings. It's us that make sure that things are refrigerated. It's us that think differently about all kinds of things that nobody ever knows. What we've been doing in this group and in various different companies, and many of you have been involved, is we're trying to get the attention of a bigger audience that the OT workforce matters. We're important. And what we do can make a difference in society. And so we'd love for you to understand that things are happening. And if you want to be a part of that, let us know. Plug in. The other thing is that what is interoperability when it comes to people? If the Corps of Engineers needs to have an automation specialist that understands the technologies you guys want to put in, how on earth does he hire them? And how does he pay them? And how does he attract them when the people at the other table are going to pay more? And then how does he keep them after he's invested money into it? But we have to have partnerships on both sides of that. So understand that one of the things that we've been doing as a community of practice here is that we've established interoperable standards for the work that we do in OT. We've established standards for the 9 jobs that are most common across the entire automation industry. Whether you're advanced manufacturing, whether you're HVAC, whether you're building automation only, there are common things that we have and that we can tap into so that no one employer, no one company has to do it all by themselves. And the last thing is that as an industry, we have gotten attention so that small business and small employers can take advantage of some of the large resources that you would formerly have to be a Lockheed Martin to be able to tap into. How many of you are from small businesses? Would you like to be able to access things that are normally available to IBM and Lockheed Martin? All right. So that's what coming together does. That's what working together does and connecting. And that's why we've been forming an employer group that gives you access to the things that you need for the OT workforce we have today and the OT workforce we need tomorrow. And then final thing, I want to answer Dave's first question. He got up and talked about procurement. And I spent 15 years of my career as the asset owner, trying to get design engineers to design what we wanted, getting systems integration contractors to put in what we wanted, trying to find people that knew how to keep it working after the trucks left. And procurement cannot be underestimated. It can't. It is such a big thing. And when you think about what is the value add? If you're only looking at the value of the technology your company is out here talking about based on how much machine energy it saves, you're missing the boat. You better be talking about human energy, because human energy is the scarce resource everybody is struggling with. Everybody. And your technology empowering human energy is going to change the conversation, and it gives you all new multipliers to talk about when you're justifying the technology that you want to put in. So, with that, I'd love to know, are there any questions that you have about what's happening in workforce in this industry and how you tap in?
Hey, good afternoon. Jim Walters, Army Corps of Engineers. You indicated you had like 13 OT job billets or descriptions.
We do.
With like KPIs and.
Yep. And we're already working with the federal government, so we know your GS levels for each one of them, and it's plug and play. We've already got the HR people on board.
How do we get access to that?
Just talk to Liz, and she'll get your number, and
Liz.
we'll make sure you get you connected.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Great question.
Hey, Melissa.
Hey, buddy.
Scott Hoffman, JLL Technologies. Thank you all for coming. Great talk. I'd like to better understand, Melissa, you're in the educational side of things. How do you see generative AI disrupting this industry, specifically for, well, really any software programmer? Because the talk is generative AI is going to replace developers, BAS technicians. So how do you see that disrupting the space?
It's a great question, and it's something that we're trying to answer even in our own company. One of the hardest things about being an employer is looking at your own hypocrisy in the face every single day. And we are trying to answer that question in our own company. How are we using AI today? How are we optimizing our systems to be able to provide better service for our customers, better service for our clients? And so one thing I can tell you is that it's a top-down and a bottom-up divide. If you look at it from the bottom up, somebody has to put a device somewhere for the actuator to move. Somebody has to put a device somewhere for the water pump to kick on. Until we have technology that can make things transport, like Star Trek, for those of you that are in my generation, we have to have people that can actually put things where they need to go. But on a bigger scale, there is a lot of opportunity, but our industry in this room is very slow-moving actuator. There's a lot of horsepower in this room, but we move very slowly. So it will probably happen in other industries. We will probably see it more in some of the advanced manufacturing areas where I work, where advanced robotics and how advanced robotics are affecting other industries, and then we'll copy them.
One more question I'll throw out there to challenge everyone. So 10 or 12 years ago, JLL came out with a case study or a research paper called the 330-300 rule. And all of the conversations this evening have been focused on the 3. And it needs to shift to 300. So all of us, everyone in this room is impacted by that rule, by the way.
Why don't you tell them what that rule is, Scott?
So, sorry to steal the stage here, but $3 talks about your energy expense for a building. $30 talks about your lease cost. And I'm summarizing here. 300 is your human capital expense in any given building. And, look, I know everyone wants to work from home. That's great, except for the fact that commercial real estate is the whole reason why you have the opportunity potentially to retire at age 50 and not have to work until you're 75. So everyone that wants to work from home, remember there's consequences to your decision. There are significant consequences to your decision. And that being every single economic piece around the restaurants, the service providers that service that building. If that building's empty, all those jobs go away. Every single one of them goes away. Think about that.
All right, so the 3-30-300 rule emphasizes the impact of human capital changes. And it further emphasizes the value. If you're a vendor, if you represent a manufacturer and you have a product here, how does your product impact human energy? I consult with different companies not in this industry, and if you go to some of their trade shows, you would be blown away by how much of their marketing and advertisement advocates how many engineering hours their product saves, how many controls technician level hours their product saves, how many service hours their product saves. So it's a real huge opportunity to think about how you win in that ball game to the 300. Is this interesting? Is this a value? All right, go team. Let's get out there and win.
Okay, closed laptop means blue screen. Let's get that back. There you go. Okay, Rick, Glenn. Thanks.
31-23 final. 31-23 final.
Okay. Is Glenn around? Where's Glenn? Okay. So we're going to wrap things up here and talking about what we should do next. What are the actions that we all need to take to get smarter together? And we put this kind of table to give a sort of a conceptual view of what this means, right, in specific use cases that we just example, right? The first one is obviously the use case that we've been focused on today, the DR, right? It's tough to do that at scale. Maybe not even tough, it's probably impossible. Because of the issues that Tristan was talking about. How do you get to the machines that you actually ultimately want to control? When I used to be in the smart grid space, the utilities would say, we want to connect directly to machines and control it. That's not going to work, right? Not in commercial buildings anyway. Right, so it's going from that to a plug and play sort of view of it, right? One of you want to pick one of these to talk about?
Well, I really have two things that I really want to focus on, and there's been a lot of technical conversations, but I think I'm a dollars person, part of my sales nature, but it's all related back to dollars, right? And two real world opportunities that this exists in that have happened in the last couple of weeks that keep in mind, mega corporations are coming to an IT provider to solve. One is the discussion about field technicians, right? And how, field technicians will be tough to adapt. In a space that is not the OT space, field technicians are asking by the tens of thousands. Field technicians are begging for something to make their lives easier with their phone. That's exciting. It's because they're younger, right? And we use this every day. That's part of the reason why this is still in my phone still in my hand to bring up that point. Second is a CTO came to our team of a company that has a dozen manufacturing sites across the country. And they said, in a really exciting way for someone with an OT background, that they have 3 initiatives this year, right? And one of them was OT. Now, when I asked what that was, he said he wanted to be able to use, AI to be able to see issues with what they're manufacturing. That's barely OT, but we'll take it. So the good news is that that's the foot in the door, right? It's the foot in the door to be able to do all of this. And that's related, again, a dozen manufacturing plants with 7,000 employees this company has. And they're not quite here, but they're coming to us with at least, you know, an initiative, right? An OT initiative to solve these problems. But again, they're coming to IT people to solve it. So that's something for you guys to take away from this is that, you know, we have to talk to each other and we have to collaborate with each other, and this is how that happens.
All right. I want to talk about systems integration and the availability of useful apps, but I should ask first, how many people are in the systems integration business in this room? Okay. If I offend you, don't be funny. I'm just going to go back to partially what I said earlier. If all, best way to say this, as the world is invaded by software, as software becomes much more reusable, think about the intersection between, you know, essentially open source infrastructure as code and, you know, whatever, GitHub and just reuse and repurposing and replication and now, you know, whatever, Gen AI, et cetera, ability to automatically develop code. I mean, that completely changes the nature of what's a project's business. And I think the culture in the SI world is largely the biggest inhibitor to repeatability. I know it's an awful thing to say. But if all those tools invaded that world and everybody thought of themselves as a new and different kind of business model, I think the problem of useful apps would change very quickly, because you're the largest collection of subject matter experts and domain expertise in the whole story, just not leveraged as much as maybe the technology might be able to do now.
Thank you. Great. Rick?
Yeah, I was actually going to talk about the useful apps and the innovations as well. Glenn just said everything I was going to say. Yeah, but the innovation part is what we're really looking for is the expertise in this group. And as we are all preparing to retire, not me, I've got a 12-year-old, but as we're thinking about retiring, the place to put your expertise is into an app that leverages this kind of platform. And don't stop with energy. As we were just talking about the 3,300, think about the productivity of the building, because there's actually another number. There's the 3,000. So it's 330, 300, 3,000. The productivity per square foot expected from real estate. So don't think about just the energy savings. Think about those other bigger numbers and how your expertise using this new data platform can be put to bringing efficiency and competitiveness to areas that where we couldn't do before, because we now have the ability to easily say these different systems can connect to each other, and the data from those can be put to make better decisions that we hadn't thought about before.
I pick up on the ESG, the second row there. And Jim talked about it a little bit earlier. And it's all to do with the data, right? Because all of those things, whether it's EAG, AI, analytics, it's the whole bunch of other sort of similar things, they all need data. And the one problem that I think as an industry, we consistently agree on is that it's really difficult and it's really hard to get data at mass, at scale, right? And once you start dealing with AI, you need more data. The more data AI gets, the better it is, right? And so I think that's so important that we have these ways of actually being able to access data and use it for something. That something could be a whole bunch of things, a whole bunch of sort of functions. And for that, you need a generic data platform, which is the term you're using, to be able to aggregate or to be able to find the right data that you need and connect to it very easily. Right? So to me, that's kind of one of the most important things. Incidentally, Scott's been going around. Have you distributed to everyone? Yeah. So this whole project has always been about creating a community, creating an ecosystem, right? And obviously the people who have been working on this, the IBB team and everybody that's been on stage, is that sort of nascent ecosystem. And one of the reasons why we're doing this summit at AHR is that we want to expand that. So from here on in, we want to regard you as being part of that community and ecosystem. If you want to opt out, you probably can, but anyway. And the way we want to sort of communicate what it is that is really important so that we all are saying the same thing is on this sheet of paper that you've all been handed to. And if you haven't got one, we can get one. And it actually has this table on it. And it also has this thing, which is, what should we do next? If you're a hardware vendor, who wants to take that? Rick?
Well, hardware vendors, I feel like they've wanted their devices to be able to be more connected and without necessarily have to go through proprietary systems and design your hardware, you know, for, I'm talking about mechanical system hardware, folks. But if you're if you're mechanical systems, you can adopt, you know, or demand that your connectivity options use an IBB. From a hardware vendor, if you are in the controls business, listen for those signals in the market and say, holy cow, this would be easier to be able to provide these sort of connections using this IBB approach. Put yourself back into the software business and not into the, happen to be the hardware support business.
And for software vendors, do you want to pick that?
Yeah, perfect. The big thing is work with people who have done it. Like I said, when I pitched this idea expecting a million questions, a million, you know, comments from our partners, it was, oh, that's it? You know, let's work with people who have done it and work together, right? And also have, you know, there's a workforce shortage. So lean on those people who can do this in a timely manner, who, you know, can do it in a way that is efficient for your team.
And for integrators, who wants to take that? Glenn, you were talking about that.
I already abused this group earlier.
But you can.
I mean, I think the integrator community is the heartland of in other words, domain expertise, large numbers of people, and a huge ability to move the world more to a modern state. And let's just go do that fast.
Some will, some won't. We're excited to work with the ones
that do,
that want to. Sure, it's hard. As Glenn said, I'm copying your line now.
That's okay.
Sure, it's hard. Let's get on with it.
So Rick, you want to take this?
Well, the consulting engineer community is already using division, well, the 50 divisions or whatever it is. And you know, the framework for the division 2525 is simply being put out there as a suggestion of putting depth, as Pete described, to this sort of vacant spot in the MSI or the, excuse me, CSI framework. And give us feedback, you know, contribute, participate. We're not saying this is etched in stone yet. We're saying that this is a good addition to the already good specifications. The other thing we're doing with you know, we're tipping our cap to the existing process. As much as we want to change how procurement happens, we do recognize the fact that you have to have contracts. You have to have contract documents. What we're saying is these are a good start. Either use the whole 140 pages or slim it down and use just the first 10. But you know, give it a look and give us some feedback. Participate.
And the last one here is for owners and operators. That you probably need to take that, Rick.
What's the score? Final 31-23. Chiefs have started. So the owners and operators, you know, I believe, and I've been hearing it for a long time, that owners want a more IT-centric or a more interoperable, as defined by IT, you know, set of solutions. And they're looking for breaking down the walled gardens. And so owners and operators, read the Harbor Research papers, for one. Pick up the specifications. Start to talk about the IBB. Start to talk about the IT-centric design principles. And that's, it's kind of as simple as that. It's just amazing how quickly vendors will change how they do things if owners articulate things in a very specific way attached with money. So
by the way, open systems will multiply the scale of any existing market by arguably at least 2, 3, 4 times its value-added portion of value today. There's just bigger pie.
So one thing interesting is that the enterprises that own buildings and operate buildings are already in the cloud and are already cloud native. And we actually tested, we went to, Jim and I went to Realcomm in Vegas last June, and we tested that message. And it really resonated, and it also resonated with another group of people, the MSPs, the managed service providers. And they looked at the diagram of IBB, and they basically said, that's for us to manage. That's for us to sell a service on top of, right? Which is great, because they already have the infrastructure. They are the ones that are bringing the internet and the cloud into the enterprise for their ERP and their CRM and phones and whatever else, right? So this then for them just becomes another line item or another service that they can offer.
And speaking of specific actions, I want to again thank Lisa for speaking about the partnership with Realcomm and the opportunity June 19th in Tampa. The more partners that we have that are part of this, this little journey, the better that story gets, and you're going to have an opportunity to be part of that group in Tampa.
And the last thing is just setting some expectations, right? We've done, we think we've made a lot of progress in the last year, as we've talked about, but there's still quite a bit of work to do. So this is kind of a timeline. This is what we anticipate as being doable over the course of the rest of this year, and then 25 and 26, the 2 years beyond, right? So from a marketing perspective and communications perspective, we're going to be focused on evangelizing the IBB architecture as we've done here, really for the next 6 months. Beyond that, and you'll see why in the next line, is that we want to evangelize the use of IBB in sort of the second half of this year. And beyond that, beyond 24, it's really about expanding the IBB market opportunities. That is in concert with, so the yellow line is effectively the external activities of the IBB project. The red line row is the sort of internal, right, what we have to do. Right? From our perspective, what we have to do is to productize the IBB. What we have right now is a proof of concept. It all works. We know it works. We know all the fundamentals work, but we need to productize it because you have to productize something for it to get deployed. The second half of this year, we think, will be in a sort of test and validate mode of the IBB. And then beyond that, obviously evolving whatever functionality that needs to be done. So from a software developer perspective, build apps, build more apps, and build more apps. Pretty simple. From a hardware perspective, develop the IBB devices, market the IBB devices, and I don't know, beyond this year, we expand the use cases, but it's obviously expanding the market. And the last one, which is probably the most important in terms of the expectations of deployment of this technology, we think that in the next 6 months, we're really in the POC sort of mode. And then in the second half of this year, we'll be in sort of deploying beta projects, let's put it that way. And then we'll be deploying real projects next year. But all of that is contingent on building this ecosystem and making it work and make it all the collaboration work. So that's really important. And love to get any other thoughts from you guys.
More faster now. Just because you're old doesn't mean you can't be creative.
Okay, so that's kind of the end of our program as such. Would love to sort of open up the last 15 minutes to questions or comments from the floor. Just come up to the mic. Don't be shy. It's been like to get some feedback on this approach and this vision. Scott's not shy.
While you're all thinking about this, I just wanted to let you know that a lot of the resources and things that you heard about today, you can find online. So Div 2525 is at div2525.org, hard one to remember. And the IBB is at interoperablebuildingbox.com. You can look it up on Twitter as the IBB Project and also the IBB Project at LinkedIn. So you should be able to find this stuff. Pete's documents for the Div 2525 are available. And just as a reminder, there's an intro document that's a PDF. Start with that. And then if you need some really good bedtime reading, the full framework that's 100 plus pages is also available for your enjoyment.
Any other thoughts or questions? Otherwise, of course.
I'm speaking at a national facility management, something in March on smart buildings and how we can use data for ESG. So I think if we reach out to the BOMAs, to the IFMAs, you put up the building owners, you got to talk to the building owners. They some of you already said, the real estate people see this in other areas. They didn't think it for their building. So I think there's some connectivity that we could build on. And, you know, and I talk to you about how we get this into my talk when I give it.
Yeah.
Well, I see you.
I think that becomes sort of much more powerful as this community evolves, right? Because then it's not a few people trying to persuade something. It's actually a movement. And that's obviously why this exists and why we're having this summit to sort of expand that. Yeah, come, Greg.
Hi, my name's Dominic. I'm actually here from New Zealand, so I'm attending AHR for the first time. I've actually worked across multiple segments, verticals within this industry. So I've started off as a consulting engineer, working for some of the tier one consultants. So your WSPs, your AECOMs, that sort of thing. And then I sort of transitioned into a sort of self-employed specialist in the control system space. And now I sort of act as a bit of an advisor back home in New Zealand on a couple of hospital sort of facility technical panels, operations, facility management, and I guess as an advisor. Now, I'm actually here in your market, I've made it all the way here, just to learn more about how you guys do things. So can I ask, there's a few people in here put their hands up as system integrators and vendors. How often, in terms of your process for procurement, have you been value engineered off a project because of cost or other factors? Yep, you've been value engineered out of a project and you sort of met specification. You believe you met specification. So in this room, how many quantity surveyors, project managers, and I guess intermediaries involved in the procurement process are in this room right now? Okay, so you guys probably have the exact same problem as we have back home, which is some of these messages we're talking about, all great points, product looks interesting. I think we're selling this to the wrong people. Because ultimately, it can get specified, but the decision makers who are looking at what we do aren't necessarily in the right organizations. So I think one of the things we probably need to do as an industry, and it's probably a global industry, I don't think, if we were to look at all of us involved in this industry globally, it's probably it would be a thimbleful compared to other people involved in construction. Because even the main contractor, I think you guys call them general contractor, the builder, are they in this room? So some of those people make decisions about what goes into projects and not. So I think we need to do a better job in terms of selling to a better audience. I actually like Melissa's talk. I think that's one of the most important discussions I've heard today is we need to spread that education and kind of make the industry understand what it is we do, why we do it, and why it actually is important.
Well put.
I love that point because from a PM perspective, we have the same problem, right? And I think the first thing when working with PMs is that PMs are going to appreciate a documented process. And if we're documenting things, 2525, perfect example of, it's something that can be executed. And then from a PM perspective, and no one likes to just be told what to do with no reason why. Like that's not going to be, effective. But from a PM perspective, if this shows them that their projects can get done quicker, that they can, have it can get done quicker, it can be more efficient, it takes less of how in the world do we find, a field tech level person when we're short staffed, all of those kinds of things, because we're being more efficient, that's how you adapt from a project management perspective. But like we're facing the same problem in a different industry. So I love your point.
Make it better, faster, cheaper.
Where have we heard that before? Better, faster, cheaper. Anything else before we thank the people that spent, we alluded to it, there's a lot of volunteer time that went into well, it's all volunteer time.
One of the things about this platform and the demo is that just the whole process that I was demonstrating to install an app looks very easy, right? And that's the whole point. And it's almost like in the IBB project, we're saying, oh, is that it? We did all this work and it's just for that. But that's the whole point, right? All of the complexity is hidden, and several points been made about how many people have created phone apps, right? Same thing, right? The people who need to use it just needs to use it without really needing to understand what's underneath it from a complexity perspective. So I think that's really, really important. Okay, so with that, we're going to wrap.
There is wine, beer, a little bit. And there's also a bar not too far from here. And somewhere there's a TV with the Chiefs game on it. And 0-0, yeah. Yeah, and the Bills are on the 20. That's not good. But I do want to thank everybody that has spent that volunteer time to get these demos to where they are, to show how that path works. And then everybody else that participated in presenting. And again, thank you very much. This is we're just getting started, I feel like. Hope everybody feels that.
And just one other point. This is the Sunday of AHR, right? So we have 3 more days of AHR. So come and see us in booth S6325. It's the Landmark booth. We also have a recap of this summit on Tuesday on the automated buildings track, educational track. And there are some other sort of sessions that include some of the speakers talking about these kinds of things. And Ken Gilbert, you're talking about cloud and BACnet sort of at one point. And lastly, on Wednesday, we're doing what we call an IBB workshop. And the idea is we're going to create an opportunity for anybody that's interested in sort of knowing more, digging into what this is all about to have that conversation. So that starts at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, if you're still here. And it's going to run until 2 o'clock. So please come and join us on any of those sort of along the next 3 days. So with
Held them to a field goal. It's 3-0.